Hey everybody, my name is LaPrecious and welcome to my channel. Let's talk with LaPrecious. I'm sorry, every time I do an intro, it's like my tongue twists from TikTok to YouTube. But you guys know this is YouTube, so welcome to my channel named Let's Talk with LaPrecious. So here we go. Okay, so the title of this video is called Santeria and how to gain knowledge before becoming initiated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an introduction on Santeria. So Santeria is an Afro Cuban religion, and the reason why it is called an Afro Cuban religion is because during the transatlantic slave trade, the slaves that were brought over practiced Ifa. And when they came to modern day Cuba, they were ruled by the conquistadors or they were ruled by the slave masters, slave owners, however you want to call them, that were Spaniard or from Spain. And their religion at the time was Catholicism due to the slaves being slaves, like many of the slaves, especially in the New World, mainly Central America, Mexico, South America, the Caribbean, and even in the Southeast United States, the slaves could not openly speak their languages or practice their traditions or practice their culture. Therefore, the slaves in Cuba that practiced Ifa, they had to disguise their religion under Catholicism, which is where the term Santeria came from, which means by way of the saints or the way of the saints. Another term for Santeria is called Lukumi. Lukumi is a Yoruban word, and Yoruba is pretty much the name of the tribe that the African slaves who practiced Ifa came from, and the language that they spoke was called Yoruban. So when you're practicing Santeria or when you're reading about Santeria, you will not only come across Spanish terms, but you'll also come across Yoruban terms because that was the language that was spoken by the Yoruba Nigerians who practiced Ifa that eventually became Santeria because it was synchronized or mixed with Catholicism. So, that's as far as like the origins and where it came from and how it came to be known as Santeria. Now, Santeria is a religion that encompasses the Orishas. A lot of people have been talking about the Orishas for the past 2 years since this grand spiritual awakening that's been happening online and even offline with, the African American community as well as the Latino community becoming more woke or more awakened to their ancestral traditions and practices. So, when it comes to Santeria, Santeria is comprised of the belief system that comes from Ifa, but it mainly focuses on the Patakis, which are known as sacred stories of the creation of life and how the Orishas or the deities in the Santeria tradition came to live life pretty much with their life experiences and how they could be inspirations to us, good guides to us, and so on and so forth. So many of you do know about Oshun, Yemaya, Obatala, Ilegwa, so on and so forth. So the Orishas come from the Santeria religion. Now, there is a hierarchy as to how the Orishas are called and how they're categorized. So, the highest Orisha is Olodumare, and Olodumare is synchronized with God. Olodumare is the one who created life, who created the earth, and who pretty much created the Orishas. And after him is Obatala. Obatala is synchronized with Jesus. And after Obatala, you have Ilegwa. Ilegwa is known as the gatekeeper, the road opener, and the one who is the passageways to blessings and opportunities. A lot of people do get him confused with Papa Legba. Papa Legba and Ilegwa are not the same. Papa Legba comes from the Haitian Voodoo and the Dominican Voodoo religion. Ilegwa comes from the Lukumi or the Santeria tradition. After him, you have Oshun, you have Yemaya, you have Shango, you have Olokun, you have Ogun, you have Ochosi, you have you, and you have Ibeji, and what's I haven't named? Obanani. So those are just to name a few of the Orishas that are in the Santeria or Lukumi tradition. Now, when it comes to having knowledge of Santeria as far as the origins, where did it come from, what does it comprise of, what does it consist of, and is this religion right for you? Now, I will say, traditionally, when it comes to Lukumi or Santeria, most people are born into families who practice Santeria, or they are born into lineages that practice Santeria, and it was passed down throughout the generations. But due to many African Americans Being born, especially in Southeast United States, many of us were cut off, we were disparaged, we were discouraged, and we have been unbeknownst of our heritage, traditional, cultural traditions throughout time due to systematic racism, oppression, and so on and so forth. So many of us have come from lineages and families and ancestors who practice Santeria or leukemia, and we did not know it, or we do not know it. In those situations or those scenarios like that, it is advised that people consult with their ancestors. And a way that you can consult with your ancestors is you can either have an ancestral reading done by someone who is initiated in Lukumi or in Santeria. And traditionally, and I'm going to be honest with you, traditionally, Santeros, Santeras, or Babalaos or Iyanifas usually don't do ancestor readings, or they're usually not well, let me backtrack. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying to make sure that I give out accurate information so nobody kind of jumps down my throat or start sending hate messages. So let me get my words together real quick. So, traditionally, when it comes to ancestor readings is something that's really new, and many priests and priestesses have adopted some of these new reading methods and whatnot because in Lukumi or in Santeria, the traditional readings that are done is the Dilogun, the Obi, or the Odu. The obi is the one that's done with coconut pieces. The dilogun is the one that's done with cowrie shells. And the odu is pretty much like the life path reading. From my experiences, I've had the Ifa reading and I've had an odu done. And personally, I like my Ifa readings better than I like the Odu. And I really didn't like the Odu because the Iyanifa who did the Odu for me had a nasty spirit. And I'm gonna talk about that later on in this video about priests and priestesses that have nasty spirits and whatnot. So moving along. When it comes to the ancestor readings, traditionally Babalaos or Iyanifas or Santeros or Santeras, they don't do ancestor readings because the traditional way of connecting to your ancestors in Santeria and in Lukumi, we call the ancestors or spirits of the dead the Egun or Egungun. So when it comes to your Egun or your Egungun, you can pretty much set up an ancestor altar. Now, there are different ancestor altars that can be prepared, and there are different ways to connect with your ancestors. One way to connect with your ancestors is with the boveda. So, a boveda is pretty much a traditional, and I will say that it is a mix of, I'm trying to say this as correctly as possible. When it comes to a boveda, it's a mix of Catholicism and it's spiritualism, what we call espiritismo, because the way that the table is set up is the way that the Catholic Church would set it up with the multiple cups of water, whether it be counts of 7 or counts of 9 glasses of water. Then you'll have a picture of a deceased relative. There usually be like a spirit doll. And a lot of times spirit dolls can be bought, but in order for that spirit doll to be powerful, it does have to be cleansed and a spirit has to be invoked in this doll in order for it to have power. So traditionally, there will be a picture of a deceased relative or pictures of deceased relatives, and there will be a spirit doll that has the spirit of an ancestor, the spirit of a deceased relative who is considered an ancestor as well, or it may have the spirit of La Madama, or a spirit that just chooses to you, or it could be a spirit that has been a spirit that's been following the family for years and years or generations. And many people will put food and necklaces, jewelry, any other things that are sacred to the family or the ancestors while they were living. That's one way of connecting to the Egungun or the Egun. So you can have a Boveda. A Boveda is pretty much a mixed Catholic and Spiritism way of doing a ancestor altar. Now, with African Americans, we usually do hoodoo. We usually do hoodoo. And hoodoo is pretty much the folk religion of African Americans. And actually, the root of hoodoo is voodoo or Ifa. Because when you look at traditional hoodoo, as far as like the practices, as far as like the use of plants and herbs and candles, it pretty much uses the same elements of earth, fire, water, and air, which are the same elements that are used in venerations and worship and honor in voodoo and Santeria. And when you look at those intricate details and intricate pieces of hoodoo, you can trace them back to hoodoo. You could trace them back to voodoo, whether that be Haitian voodoo or whether that be Dominican voodoo, and you can also trace them back to Ifa, whether it be the deprived religion of Santeria or the head religion or the house religion of Ifa. So hoodoo does have its roots in Ifa as well as voodoo as well. So that's why a lot of times when you study the traditions of hoodoo or study the traditions of Santeria or Ifa or Isheshe or even with Haitian voodoo or Dominican voodoo, you'll see a lot of similarities because they all stem from the same places in West Africa. Now, moving along from Egun or Egungun, that's the traditional way of connecting with your ancestors. In Santeria or Lukumi, before people get involved with Santeria or Lukumi, we do advise people to connect with their ancestors. Your ancestors were the ones who practiced this religion. Your ancestors were the ones who practice this religion. Your ancestors were the one who passed this religion down from generation to generation, and your ancestors were the ones who lived and breathed in this religion. So, worshiping and honoring the Egungun, whether it be through a boveda or a misa. Now, I will say a misa is a Spanish term for mass, and this is where we go back to the Catholic Church because, like I said, due to Santeria or Lucumi, being synchronized or being cultivated in Cuba with the mix of Ifa and Catholicism, you will see a lot of similarities between Santeria and Catholicism because they have a lot of similarities due to the synchronization of African traditions being mixed with Catholicism. Now, a misa is a Spanish term for mass. A misa is pretty much where you have a table set up. You're pretty much honoring your ancestors as well, but it's more so of a celebration. There will be prayers, there will be litanies, there will be candles, and it'll just pretty much be like a welcoming celebration or a welcoming moment or like a period in time where you'll just be welcoming in your ancestors, and any ancestor can pop up. Grandmothers, aunts, uncles, long lost relatives, all types of spirits can come up when it comes to misas because misas or mass is when you're pretty much praying, when you're pretty much welcoming in the spirits, when you're pretty much welcoming in your ancestors or the saints and so on and so forth. I actually have a book, and I know in this video I was talking about, books and how books can actually help you become more educated and more knowledgeable of the Santeria faith. Now, in this video, I will be doing books in English because I have books in Spanish and in English because I've discerned which books on Amazon to buy that talk about Santeria because the thing about Santeria and gaining knowledge, I want to say 15 years ago, Santeria was more so of a Latin thing. It was mainly known in the Afro Caribbean community, like with Puerto Ricans, with Cubans, with Dominicans, with Venezuelans, so on and so forth. And the reason why I mention those nationalities is because even though Santeria did originate in Cuba, it did spread throughout the Caribbean, and due to Latin Americans having such a heavy impact on American culture, you have seen the spread of Santeria throughout the United States, especially in Miami, Florida, especially in New York, especially in Los Angeles and California. I know there's a Santeria community in Texas as well, and so on and so forth. And I've also noticed an upheaval of Santeria initiates or practitioners in the Mexican community as well. because throughout time, especially when Fidel Castro was in office or when Fidel Castro was in power in Cuba, many of the Cubans exiled in Mexico and they brought on their traditions and religions. And I do believe that's why you do have Mexicans who do practice Santeria or Lucumi because of that exposure due to the exilement of Cubans coming into Mexico. So, you do see, so I want to say like in the past 20 years, 15 years, Santeria was more so of a Latin thing, but more so in recent years there has been a lot of interest in new initiates and new practitioners in the African American community due to the spiritual awakening that happened at the peak of the pandemic 2 years ago. So you see a whole lot more books, you see a whole lot more texts, a whole lot more documentaries and priests and priestesses popping up. And a lot of them are not accurate, a lot of them are not factual, and a lot of them are not giving the right information. With my discernment, I have been able to discern which books are accurate and which ones are not. And I have books here in my house that have the accurate information about Santeria. I have them both in English and in Spanish. Since I'm doing this video in English, I'm only going to talk about the books that I have in English. So, when it comes to the Misa, and I'm not going to, excuse me, contradict myself, but I'm going to go ahead and show this book about songs for Misas, even though it's in Spanish. Now, what you see here, this is a Misa book. And like I said before, misa is a Spanish term for mass. So when it comes to the mass, you'll pretty much have a table set up. And you'll even see a picture of it right here. Because right here you have the statues that are used in the Spiritismo to represent the ancestors. And like I mentioned before, you see the multiple cups of water. And when it comes to misas, the spirits that are called on in misas don't necessarily have to be the spirits of ancestors. They can also be the spirits of saints, of different spirits in different religions. Because when it comes to Espiritismo, especially Puerto Rican Espiritismo, is pretty much a mix of different spirits that come from the different religions that came to the island of Puerto Rico. So they won't necessarily be the Congo spirits or the Asian spirits. They could be Asian spirits, they could be European spirits, they could be native spirits, so on and so forth, that are called upon in a misa. So you have like the flower here, you have candles here, you have the statues depicting the ancestors. These statues, most specifically, are used to venerate ancestors. And then you have the cups of water, and then you have the flower. Flowers, when it comes to flowers being put on altars, flowers that are put on misa tables, they can be added to represent life and growth and fruition, but they can also be added, especially if they're flowers that are of favor or the favorite flowers of orishas or different spirits, different saints, so on and so forth. So, yes, even though this book is in Spanish, I'm going to show it to you anyway. This is a book that's consisted of songs that are for misas or masses. And like I mentioned before, when it comes to the intro into Santeria, this is really the way that it's supposed to be done. You're supposed to either have an ancestor altar set up or a boveda. That way you're able to connect with your ancestors, so on and so forth, to see if Santeria is a religion that they want you to be a part of, or if that's the religion that they want, that they were a part of. And I will say, well, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to confuse anybody, because this is a way of the religion when it comes to ancestors. So you do need to check with your ancestors to see if this is a religion that they practice and they want you to practice it, or if they have called you to practice the Santeria or the Lukumi tradition. So I mentioned two ways you can connect with your ancestors to find out is to either have a boveda, which is like an ancestor altar, or to have a misa, which is like a mass. And a mass is pretty much like a celebration, or it's pretty much a mini ceremony in its own right and in its own way, to welcome in the spirits through songs, litanies, and prayers, to just welcome in the presence of all these spirits and deities and ancestors, to pretty much talk to them and cultivate that relationship with them and that oneness with them, to see if this is a relationship, well, not relationship, if this is a religion or the tradition for you. So moving along from Egungun or Egun. Now, when it comes to the religion of Santeria or Lukumi. I will say a lot of people don't know how to connect with ancestors. A lot of people don't know how to hear them. A lot of people don't know how to connect, so on and so forth. If this is you or if you are in that situation, it is best for you to get an EFA reading. And the way that you get an EFA reading and the people that you get EFA readings from are Babalaos. Now, when I say this, I am not being racist and I am not being nationalist when I say this. I do not advise anybody to get an IFA reading done from a Nigerian Babalao that has messaged you, that has reached out to you, or that has called you on WhatsApp, Facebook, or Instagram private messages. And they could even come through sometimes through TikTok. I do not recommend people getting IFA readings from these Babalaos in Nigeria or even if they're in Argentina, Cuba, so on and so forth. It's sad to say that even though Ifa originated in Nigeria and even though Lukumi and Santeria derives from the Yoruba Nigerian culture, many modern day Nigerian priests that sit on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, they're making a mockery of the tradition. They're making a mockery of Ifa. They're making a mockery of Lukumi and Santeria, which is why a lot of people are confused and they are taking advantage and scamming people all across the map. I have a lot of people who come to me as clients. I've spoken to a lot of people throughout the years and whatnot that have had encounters with these Nigerian Babalaos, and they have been scammed and they have been improperly initiated. I'm just being honest. I'm just speaking the truth, and I'm just letting it be known. If you want a proper IFA reading to be done, especially if you're an American. I know IFA is worldwide now. There are people who practice IFA in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, so on and so forth. But I'm speaking to my American people right now. To those of you who would like to know if the Lukumi or if the Santeria tradition is the right one for you, you need to get an IFA reading done from an initiated priest or priestess, which would be an Iya or a Baba or an Iyanifa or Babalao. And the main places you can find these people would be in an Ile, which is like an Ifa house, or well, excuse me, not an Ifa house, an Ile, which is pretty much a house, a Santeria house, a Lukumi house, or in a Botanica, which is a Latin based spiritual store. Because many Botanicas, some, not all, are owned or ran by Babalaos and the Yanifas. I recommend that you either go to an Ile or you go to a Botanica that is established, that has good reviews, good references, that has no bad history of scamming people, ripping people off, being mean or nasty or anything like that. Because you do have to be careful when you come across these Babalaos and the Yanifas, because even though a lot of these people are properly initiated and they're properly, installed in these religions, they don't have the best attitudes and they don't have the best intentions when talking to people that are interested in the Lukumi or the Santeria traditional religion. So, if you are an American, I only recommend that you get an IFA reading done from a Babalao or a Yanifa that is in an Ile, an established Ile, and a replicable Ile in the United States of America. Chicago is a good place to find one. Miami is a good place to find one. And you could try Houston, Texas, because those are the only three places I know that I have experience with that have replicable and good Babalaos or Yanifas. As far as anywhere else, they tend to be kind of scattered or they just nowhere to be found. Because I've even tried to find one in New York, and a lot of them tell me, they either died or they went back to Miami or Cuba. So Chicago, Miami, and Houston, Texas are the three best places I know to find replicable Iyani Fuzz or Babalaos. So that's that. Now, getting an IFA reading, they'll pretty much let you know what the message that Orumila has to say. The reason why I say Orumila is because Orumila is the Orisha of divination. He's the one that gives the word or gives a message during an IFA reading that speaks through the Babalao or that speaks through the Babalao that is giving you the reading or that speaks through the Iyanifa, because Iyanifas do readings as well. So Orumila will speak through either the Babalao or speak through the Yanifa and let you know whether the Lukumi or the Santeria tradition or religion is for you or not. And you will also find out which Orisha follows you, and you can find out the Orisha who crowns your head, and you can find out who your Orisha parents are. And I will go into further detail about finding out your crown Orisha and properly finding out your Orisha parents, because that involves a ceremony as well, but the ceremony can be optional. So, I've talked about the introduction to Santeria Lukumi. I've talked about how to get a proper reading done from an Iyanifo or Babalawo. I've talked about how to connect with your ancestors first before getting involved. And now I'm going to talk about the books. So let's talk about books. So I mentioned one book. And if anybody that's watching this video speaks Spanish or is friends married to somebody who speaks Spanish and is interested in getting this book, go ahead and get this book, because this book is a good book to get about misas. And I actually bought this book from a botanica. Sometimes when you go to these botanicas, they have some really rare books about Ifa or Lukumi or Santeria that are really good, and some of them you can't even find online. So you may be able to find this one on Amazon or eBay, and if not, you may have to shop around some botanicas to get it. But yeah, some of the best books on Ifa, Santeria, or Lukumi are kind of rare. Okay, so let's talk about books. Now, it's sad to say that many Babalaos and Yanifas will tell you to not rely on books to be well informed or aware about Ifa, Santeria, or Lukumi. I want to say do not trust a Babalawo or a Yanifa that is telling you this, because knowledge is key and knowledge is power. And many Babalaos, especially the Hispanic ones or the Latin ones, sometimes don't understand how tone deaf that is, because as African Americans or people of African descent, we know that our ancestors who were slaves were banned from reading. They were told not to read because if they read, they would be abused, whipped, badgered, or even killed from reading. But we also know the reason why they didn't want our ancestors to read, because they knew once they gained the knowledge that they were being enslaved and being mistreated and stuff like that, they would revolt and turn away from slavery and fight and get it and seek freedom and whatnot. I hate to say it, many of these Babalaos and the Yanifas preach that same message, to not read books about Santeria, Ifa, or Lukumi, to not go online finding articles about Ifa, Santeria, or Lukumi, to not do research, blah, 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 whatever. Do not listen to that. Now, I will say there are many books out there that do give inaccurate information about Santeria, Lukumi, and Ifa. There are a lot of websites out there now, and even YouTube channels and TikTok profiles that do give out very much inaccurate information about Ifa, Lukumi, and Santeria. So there is some truth for that, but not all YouTube channels are incorrect, not all TikTok pages are incorrect, and not all books and websites are incorrect. There's a lot of replicable information out there that has the accurate information about Ifa, Santeria, and Lukumi. The two main books that I really recommend to beginners in Santeria or Lukumi would be to get these two books. These two books are really popular. The pink one is called New Revised Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers. This will pretty much give you a guideline and stories about the Catholic saints and their Orisha avatars. It'll also give you information about the Santeria religion, the Catholic religion, how to pray, and even the feast days of the Orishas and the Catholic saints. So this book does have a lot of intricate information about the Catholic saints as well as the Orishas. Now, the blue book is a little bit thicker. It does hold a little bit more information and it is more in depth. But the thing that I love mostly about the blue book is that it puts some respect on the Santeria and the Lukumi tradition, especially in the introduction. Because whoever wrote this, I'm glad that they put some respect on the Orisha and the Lukumi tradition or religion when they did this intro. I'm going to go ahead and make it short and sweet. This person pretty much said that over the years, a lot of people have tried to whitewash Santeria and Lukumi, and yes, they have. A lot of people have tried to strip the African base or the African background. And that's something that I really don't understand. And I know this is a side piece for me. One thing that I don't understand, especially in the Latin community a little bit, why there has been this growing in denial of African lineage or African blood or African heritage. And I really have noticed this more so with Puerto Ricans a little bit. I don't know if it has to do with Donald Trump whitewashing America and American culture, or if it has to do with people feeling like they're losing their Latinidad or they're losing their Latinness and whatnot. But there has been some increase of in denial of the African presence and whatnot in the Latin community, and you have started to see it a little bit in the Orisha Lukumi tradition, where people refuse to acknowledge that Africans or African slaves or African descended people had a lot to do with the contributions in the Latin Caribbean cultures. And not just in the Latin Caribbean cultures, but in the Latin culture and the Latin community as a whole. And this book, in shorter terms, is pretty much saying that yes, Lucumine and Santeria does have connections to Catholicism, does have roots in Catholicism, does have a lot of similarities to Catholicism, but above all else, it derived from Ifa, which came from West Africa, which therefore makes it an African based or an Afro based religion or tradition. And I love that they put some respect on Santeria and Lukumi with the introduction because it is true. Because a lot of people forget that when it comes to the Latin cultures, mainly the Dominican culture, the Cuban culture, and the Puerto Rican culture, black descended people have contributed a lot to those cultures and a lot to those islands. So, this is a really good guide and a really good book to read as far as finding out more about the Orishas, the Catholic saints, how the Catholic saints and the Orishas that they're connected to have a lot of similarities, their colors, their feast days, how to pray to them, so on and so forth. So, these two books are really good. And the blue book is called Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers, Volume 2. And this one, yeah, Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers, Volume 2. So, yes, the pink book is Volume 1 and it's a little bit thinner. And the blue one is Volume 2 and it's a lot thicker, as you guys can see. This is the pink one, this is the blue one. One thing I will say, and this has been from my experience of being in so many botanicas, I recommend buying these books on Amazon because some botanicas, for whatever reason, they like to hijack the prices when it comes to a lot of these spiritual books, and I don't know why. And it is something you have to be careful of when it comes to botanicas because some of them do kind of run on the basis of taking people's money instead of giving people knowledge. So be careful of that when you are going into these botanicas. Many botanicas are selling these books at like $15, $20. Last time I checked, and it may have gone up since then, since this book has become so popular, Amazon carries it for maybe $10, $12. So you may be able to find them cheaper on Amazon. If not, they will be $15 to $20 if in a Botanica if the Botanica carries these two books. Another book that is popular, it's been popular for a while in the spiritual community, especially the African American spiritual community. And it's a book that was written by Lilith Dorsey, and it's called Orishas, Goddesses, and Voodoo Queens. This book is a really good book to read if you are heavily interested in the Lukumi tradition or the Santeria tradition, and especially if you are interested in the feminine orishas or the feminine deities in Santeria or Lukumi. The lady who wrote this book has experiences in the Santeria Lukumi tradition. She has experiences in the Haitian voodoo tradition, and she also has experiences in other religions as well that are non African. It's been actually 2 years since I read this book. I haven't really read this book since I first bought it 2 years ago. So I don't want to speak falsely about whether the lady is initiated or not. I believe she is, but like I said, don't quote me on that. You're going to have to read the book to find out. But this book is very accurate. And the reason why I say this book is very accurate, because within my encounters of the Orishas and with my relationships that I've had with the Orishas, a lot of the knowledge that I have used and a lot of the recipes and a lot of the herbal knowledge that's given in this book about the Orishas has helped me, and it's shown a lot of progress and progression in my rituals and in my altars dedicated to the feminine Orishas, specifically Yemaya and Oshun. And she does talk about Yemaya and Oshun very in depthly in this book. So I recommend these three books to read to those of you that are interested in the Lukumi or in the Santeria tradition. Once again, the first book is called Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers. This is a pink book. This is volume one. Helping Yourself with Selected Prayers. This is going to be called volume two, and it's blue. And this book is called Orishas, Goddesses, and Voodoo Queens, written by Lila Dorsey, and the subtitle is The Divine Feminine and the African Religious Traditions, or what we call, well, I know it's mainly called African Traditional Religions, and for sure we call them ATRs, but it says here African Religious Traditions. Same thing, just worded differently. Now, one thing I want to say is that when you are looking for a Babalawo or an Yanifa, please pay attention to the attitudes and the vibes that they give off. If a Babalawo or an Yanifa is trying to talk you out of getting an Ifa reading or learning about Santeria Alukumi, and you know you're interested in it, and you know your ancestors have told you to go ahead and get in and get involved, run away from them. A lot of Babalawos have a gatekeeper like mentality. And I know a lot of people love to pick on the Latin Babalaos and the Cuban Babalaos and the Puerto Rican Babalaos. Everybody's experiences are different, and I'm not going to just pinpoint one specific ethnicity or whatnot because, as I mentioned before in the TikTok live, everybody's experiences are going to be different based on your encounters. You know, a lot of us as black people, we vibe with different nationalities and we don't vibe with different nationalities based on kindred of spirits. Now, if a Babalawo and a Yanifa is giving you that vibe, don't go to them. A lot of Babalaos and the Yanifas sometimes have this gatekeeper like mentality where they feel like since they're initiated or since they're a priest or a priestess, they're the ones that dictate who gets initiated and who gets involved instead of letting the Orishas decide or a person's ancestors decide who should be initiated, who should be involved or not. If you encounter a Babalawo or an Yanifa with that mentality, don't go to them. One thing I want to say about that is I have experienced this, and I'm even going to kind of do a sermon a little bit with this. If you want to skip over this in the video or whatever, because I feel like I have to get this off of my chest. It is a shame how in the African American community, especially with African American female priests, how nasty the attitudes are. And that's been my experience in this tradition and in this religion. I feel like, and I'm just going to be honest and I'm going to be blunt, many people who have been initiated into Ifa, that have become Babalaos and that have become Iyanifas, have been under some really brutal and nasty and mean Nigerian Babalao Babalaos, or Yanifas. And the reason why I say Nigerian is because when it comes to Nigerian culture, like I said, I'm not nationalist and I'm not racist. And I'm Nigerian myself by heritage. I'm not saying that just so I can give myself merit to say whatever I got to say. I don't just claim to be stuff for clout or claim to be stuff to be excused from saying things. I have Nigerian blood in me. My ancestors are Nigerian. I've taken the DNA test. So what? I'm Nigerian, so I can say it. Nigerians are known, whether it's men or women, to come off as very harsh, rash, cutthroat, very harsh when it comes to speaking to people, guiding people, and teaching people things. And it's sad to say that many Puerto Rican, because I've experienced Puerto Rican Babalaos and Yanifas having that mean, nasty ass attitude as well when it comes to getting involved in Ifa, Santeria, or Lukumi. But I've really noticed it more so with the African American Yanifas as well. When it comes to speaking to people, this, that, and the third, and I'm going to say in the Nigerian culture, and even in the Nigerian, in the Reuben tradition, in the Yoruban culture, that may be common to be spoken to that way, to be handled that way, but it's not right because you have a lot of people of African descent that have spoken about the toxicity of being dogged out, being rolled over, being spat on, made to feel less than, being cheated on, ratted on, competed with, so on and so forth, by African blooded parents, especially if you're Caribbean, African American, or even downright African, have dealt with the toxicity of being dogged out and misused and abused and spoken to the wrong way. Being verbally abused, mentally abused is not right and it's not okay, whether it's systematic, whether it's religious, or whether it's social. That way of speaking to people and handling people is not right and it's not correct. And it's unfortunate that a lot of Puerto Rican Babalaos and Yanifas and a lot of African American Yanifas and Babalaos have been taught under that way of speaking and thinking and whatnot. And that's why a lot of people come up against a lot of Puerto Rican Yanifas or Babalaos and a lot of African American Yanifas or Babalaos that have that mean and nasty staunch like attitude. If you come across somebody who's like that, steer far away from them. I don't care how initiated they are. I don't care if they have the highest rank of E5, if they've gone through all the initiations and some. Do not go to them. These people are mean, they're nasty, they're harsh, and they will abuse you, and they will verbally abuse you and attack you, and they will mentally abuse you and attack you, just like their teachers did because for whatever reason, and I feel like due to African Americans being raised under this type of tutelage and lineage is why it's so normalized with the African American Iyanifas and Babalaos to be spoken to and to teach people in that manner. Because even in our own community, the African American community, we're taught like that by a lot of our parents and grandparents. And a lot of us have had to go to that counseling and therapy and get some type of Iyanla Van Zant treatment to heal from the trauma and the abuse and all of this just downgraded, despicable stuff that we've been taught as kids and as adolescents. When it comes to that type of abuse, I understand people have different ways of communicating and handling things and people and situations, even when it comes to teaching. Do not go to an Iyanifa or a Babalao if they have that type of attitude. When it comes to Ifa, Santeria, and Lukumi, and I know I'm about to get some preachers and stuff in the comments or whatever, how Ifa and Santeria are not the same, but Santeria and Lukumi derives from Ifa. And the Babalaos and the Yanifas that are giving the Ifa readings, they are initiated in Ifa. So Ifa, so what you can't have Santeria and Lukumi without Ifa. So that's just that. Now, if you come across a Babalawo Yanifa who is like that, don't go to them. And I don't care how any of them feel about me speaking about this because it doesn't make any sense how a lot of y'all will bully people for giving people accurate information about Lukumi and Santeria. I don't understand this whole thing about gatekeeping and only telling certain people and favoring certain people and dictating and delegating who could be initiated, who cannot. We are not slaves anymore. And a lot of African American people, for whatever reason, cannot get out of this mindset that we still have to be slaves, that we still have to creep around white people, that we still have to be mum and hush mouth about our traditions and stuff. And we live in a free world and in a free land. What's the secret? If you don't tell it, somebody else will. And if you don't give up the goods or give up the information, there's books and podcasts and other teachers and practitioners that are willing to give this information and teach it and tell it the right way, even if you don't. Because a lot of y'all that have this gatekeeper like mentality are really fooling yourselves and playing yourselves because y'all think y'all are keeping people out and abusing people out and ostracizing people out. But there's other ways and other forms that people can still get this information. So you're really playing a losing game. So moving along from that, steer clear away from people. When you are speaking to an Iyanifa or Babalao, pay attention to how they respect you. Pay attention to how they speak to you. But also pay attention to how they remember you. Because when you are being initiated into Lukumi and Santeria, Lukumi and Santeria is about having a relationship with the Orishas. Because Lukumi is even in the name. Lukumi is a Yoruban term, means my friend or friend of mine. The Orishas want to help you. The Orishas want to guide you. They do not want to spiritually spank you or abuse you or ridicule you or criticize you to being this big and bad, nasty and hateful and highly religious person. They want to love you. They want to care for you. They want to see you do well in life, and they want to progress you and move you forward in life. That's what Ifa and that's what Santeria and Lukumi is all about. It's all about veneration, celebration, and progression of people moving into their progression of people moving towards their destiny. So, you need to pay attention to how well a Babalawo and Yanifa remembers you. If a person can remember your name, your spirit, and your flow, that's an Orish that is a Babalawo and Yanifa you need to have a relationship with, a Babalawo and Yanifa you need to stay in close contact with, and that's really somebody you should be initiated under. Because these people, when they initiate you, they will become your godparents. Now, I'm gonna say another thing. You got a lot of people who love to correct me, love to think I'm wrong on time, even when I'm not. Now, when it comes to being initiated into Santeria, I did a video about this, about Eleques, and many people are watching it. Thank y'all for watching my videos. Keep spreading the word, spreading the videos, and giving people this knowledge. A lot of people like to argue me down about this, and I will say it depends on what Ele you came from or the Ele you are initiated under. The first part of being initiated into Santeria or Lukumi is receiving your Eleques, and these are the necklaces or the collares that I have on my neck. When you receive your Ifa reading, if the Orishas are ready for you to be initiated, they will call for you to have the 5 pillars of Santeria. The 5 pillars are Ilegua, Oshun, Shango, Yemaya, and Obatala. And I know a lot of people say, well, what about the 7 African powers? The 7 African powers, those are venerated more so for special needs, special requests, so on and so forth. But the 5 pillars of Santeria are the ones that I just mentioned. These Ilekes or these necklaces are like the banners or the flags for the Orishas that I just mentioned. These necklaces will not have any power if you buy them from a gas station, a botanica, grocery store, wherever you can find them. And when you buy them placed on your neck, they will not have power. When you have an Ifa reading and the Orishas have called for you to receive your 5 pillar Ilekes, they should be given to you in a ceremony. The ceremony will consist of a rogación de cabeza. A rogación de cabeza is pretty much a head washing, or they call it like a head tune up. You will have to come to the ceremony dressed in white. Your head will be washed. mainly with the herbs and whatever else is sacred to the Orisha that crowns your head. Then your body will be laid out on the floor, and specific herbs that are made for like the pulse points, mainly the chakra areas of your body. They'll be placed on your body, and your body will be cleansed and prayed over and sanctified pretty much for you to be prepared to receive your elekes. And after this, you will have to take a spiritual bath. The spiritual bath will consist of the herbs and liquids or whatever else is needed by your guardian Orisha, or the Orishas that follow you, or the Orishas that want to be involved, or maybe even Orishas that the Orishas, the five pillar Orishas. The reason why you need to be cleansed, your head needs to be cleansed, and your body needs to be cleansed in the spiritual bath, is because when you receive your elekes, you will become a new person. The old you will have to be washed off of your head. The old you will have to be washed over your body. Now, when you are cleansed, you will be cleansed in your clothes. When the purification of your head and your body is done, these clothes will be stripped off of you or cut off of you, and they'll be thrown away. That signifies the old you being thrown away. You will put on new clothes. Your head will be wrapped in white. White is the color of purification and cleansing. That's why white is so sacred to a lot of the African traditional religions, and white also represents veneration or connecting of the ancestors. So, when you're dressed up in white, these will be your new clothes representing of the new person that you'll become. Then, after you have the head washing done and the body cleansing done, you will be presented with your elekes. Your elekes can be given to you by an olorisha, which is another term for a santero or santera, and these are people that are initiated priests or priestesses in Santeria, or they can be given to you by a babalao. I'm so sick and tired of people saying that babalaos cannot give away elekes. Yes, they can. The reason why people may be saying they could not is because in their ile, or the house that they were initiated in, there may have been an olorisha or a santero or santera who did it. From my experience, babalaos can give you elekes because the person that gives you your initiation rites or your initiation ceremonies in Santeria will be your godparent. And the term that is used for godparent is madrina, which is godmother, or padrino, which is godfather. And the person who is the godchild will be called an ahijado, which is a male godchild, or a ahijada, which is a female godchild. So, your leques can be given to you by an olorisha, which is a santero or santera, which is a priest or priestess in Lukumi and Santeria, or it can be given to you by a babalao, who is a priest in Ifa. So that's that. Now, with your elekes will be fed, consecrated, prayed over, sung over, so on and so forth before they are placed on you. That's how your elekes receive ashe. I know a lot of people say ashe, a lot of times it's spelled ACHE or ASE with a hyphen above it. Ashe pretty much means it is so, it will be. It is a Yoruban term, and it also means favor, because the reason why cleansings and ebos and ademus, excuse me, and even with elekes being consecrated, is so that you or your elekes can receive the ashe or the favor of the orishas over them. When your elekes are placed over you, you have the ashe or the favor of the orishas, and you have their protection. And after you receive your elekes, if the orishas have a message for you, that's when you'll receive the messages from the orishas, what they want you to do next, or the message that they have for you in the time being. That's how that goes. So, I hope many of you enjoyed this video. I hope many of you were informed. Please do not argue with me in the comment section. Please do not send hate mail. Please do not give me any drama, flack, or whatsoever. Everything I've given in this video has been factual, has been true, and has been accurate. If you want to fight me, if you want to argue with me, you can argue with yourself after I block you. So thank you all for watching this video. Don't forget to like, leave a comment in the comment section. Also subscribe to my channel, and have a good day.